It's true. I do not want to say what I'm going to say today. I had this really cool, funny thing planned, and it was so good. And God said, no, not this time. Nope. Sorry, nope. I really love to laugh. I love to make you guys laugh. I love to laugh because it relieves stress, and stress is my biggest enemy. But I'm sick. I'm like supremely sick from head to toe and inside and out. Do I look sick? I don't look sick. That sucks because people don't believe that I'm sick. I have invisible illness. And if you look around you, I'm going to bet you a third in here have invisible illness. And it comes in many forms, many, many forms. I, as a little child, had what they called free-floating anxiety. They called it back then in the 70s. I was in my footy pajamas, and I would roam the halls at night. I would wake up with like whistles going off in my head. Something's wrong, something's wrong, something's wrong, and I didn't know what. My parents didn't know what. Was I in trouble? Did somebody call my name? Did somebody die? Why? What is the matter with me? Why am I so upset? And I still have that. I still have this incredible anxiety, and I'm going to tell you, like right up until just a few moments ago, I was out of here. I was out of here. Then Nate prayed for me. You guys want to feel like Superman? Have Nate pray for you. I'm a little bit of a puddle, but thanks, Nate. So I'm sick with a bunch of things, and I'll tell you about it, but that's why I'm a health coach. Because I'm sick. And not because I have all the answers and I need you to follow me, but because I get the struggle. Like you can't imagine, I get the struggle. My parents didn't take me to a psychiatrist. He didn't do that back in the 70s. And also it was a shameful thing back in the 70s. Yet each of my parents had their own little version of mental illness too, and their favorite coping mechanism was what they shared with me, and that is food. You eat. It makes you feel better. So then I had chronic anxiety with depression, which they call dysthymia. I had chronic anxiety and depression, and I was a food addict by the time I hit middle school. So then I started having a weight problem, so in order to kind of combat that, I came up with another very healthy tool called bulimia. So then I was keeping my weight down by throwing up the food that I was eating to soothe myself from the anxiety and the depression that I had. And so then I had the shame on top of that. So to combat the shame, I became a high-achieving perfectionist. And that worked beautifully. I mean, I was top of my class. I was winning awards. I was cute, so I was also in beauty pageants. I won scholarships. I had super scholarships to college, all paid for. I was doing great, and I had goals. What's weird about being anxious all the time is that God gave me the gift of being on stage and being a performer. I can act, and I can sing, and I can speak, and normally I can memorize, except I was supposed to say funny stuff today, and that didn't happen. Despite all my obstacles, I had really big dreams of being on stage. But then at the age of 24, I had a car accident. It was a near fatal car accident, and I was lucky to walk away. On top of all the other junk that I had to deal with, I now had a shattered spine that I had to have rebuilt with pins and rods and screws. I had a cage built around the bottom of my spine. I had a nurse and an occupational therapist. It took me months to learn just to walk again. It was amazing that I could walk again. It was amazing that I stayed alive. I qualified for Social Security permanent disability. I had one of those disabled parking permits. I had quad canes. I walked on a walker at the age of 25 years old. And my mom, who didn't live in the same state, she lived states away, she gave me some pretty good advice. She said, Whitney, you're never going to be the same as you were before. You can't push yourself like you did before. It's okay. You're still here. But you can't treat yourself like you used to. You're different now. You're injured. You're disabled. And that's okay. That's not a curse. But that's who you are now. It's a different way. You have a different way to do things. You can't do what you used to do. You probably never will. It's okay. Be good to yourself. You're not getting any younger. And stuff like you do, it's going to get harder and harder as you age. And when you get older, mark my words, your wish that you had been easier on yourself, on your mind, and on your body. And she was right about that. She said that more than 20 years ago. But the trauma of that accident, the chronic pain on top of the chronic illness that I was already facing, that was the catalyst for fibromyalgia, which is now called myalgic encephalitis or chronic fatigue syndrome. It brought that on with a vengeance and all the myriad symptoms and headaches that that brings. And then dealing with that for 20 plus years was the catalyst for what I now face, which is adrenal fatigue. Even worse than that, adrenal exhaustion. And even a doctor told me that I was in adrenal failure. That comes from stress. The stress of illness and the stress of chronic pain. The stress of the fight or flight constantly on your adrenal glands. I have a host of other things too. I have type 2 diabetes. I had obesity. I ended up with gastric bypass surgery to kind of help with some of the comorbidities that came with that. You guys, I know a lot of you, all of you can relate to what I'm saying, because if you're not sick, if you're well, you know someone and love someone who is sick. And we get in a group like this, and it's so wonderful to have the support. It's so incredible to have the cheerleaders, to get on a hangout, to know somebody who can coach you, to know somebody who's been where you've been. They're a step or two ahead and they can help you through it. And you push, and you strive, and you move ahead, and you compare yourself up against somebody else just to sharpen your skills. But that drive and that push, it wears you out. And it doesn't apply to me. And it may not apply to you. And I'm going to teach you a couple of words, the same words that my mom taught me that took me 20 plus years to learn. And I want you to say them to yourself when you have to. And I want you to say them often. And these words are, I can't. You're not supposed to say those words, right? It's like against the Holy Grail. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. But sometimes you can't. And it's okay if you can't. It's okay, because if I push myself, I will collapse. And I have. Within the last year, I've been in the hospital twice, because sometimes you can't. Maybe you can't today, or maybe you can't this very minute, and maybe you can't ever, but it's okay that you can't, because sometimes we can't. It's who we are, and we are not who we are not, and sometimes we just can't. This is one of my favorite quotes. Multitudes hover on sofas and beds like me, too drained to do anything more than just the bare necessities of daily functioning. In fact, some can't even do that. Anyone living with a chronic illness that imposes severe limitations must experience similar feelings of disappointment, frustration, fear, sadness, and envy. And I am not alone. I'm not alone. Neither are you. And on days, there are days when I can barely get out of bed. I can't get off the sofa. I feel alone and disgusted. And it is okay that day that I can't get out of bed. 20 years it took me to learn that. It is okay. And it is okay if you can't. I can't work. Some days I can't hustle at all. Sometimes I go weeks. It's been months since I've really hustled, I'll be honest with you, and I have to be okay with that. There are days I can't make my kids a sandwich to take to school with them. I spent an entire winter one year. I never made it to the second floor of my house. And I know I'm not the only one, because there are lots of invisible illnesses. Too many to name. I'd take my whole time just naming them all. You know who you are, and you know who you know, and you know who you love. So take this to heart, because chronic illness, invisible illness, and chronic pain affect so many more than we know. And we isolate and hide it and try to compensate for it because we feel less than, or we feel ashamed, or we feel embarrassed, or maybe we even feel like we deserve it. So we trudge on, we push on, we do more damage to ourselves, we stress ourselves out. Guys, it's not okay. We need to learn to take care of ourselves. We need to learn to be kind to ourselves, because that drive and that hustle and that go for it at all costs will damage us. That mentality doesn't apply to us because it causes stress. So I laugh. That's my best mechanism now. I laugh to relieve the stress because that stress will kill me. It's not an abstract idea. So learn what it is that causes you stress. Get away from it. Learn perspective. Here's my perspective. It sucks that I'm sick. It sucks that I'm sick and I've spent way too much time feeling sorry for myself and asking why me. I've had some big plans for my life and my body won't cooperate. It's not going to cooperate with me. I've had to step back and take stock and reorder my priorities. I could have died in that accident. I need to take care of my kid's mother. I need to take care of my husband's wife. They weren't sure that I would walk again, but here I am. I'm walking. I'm not limping. I don't have quad canes. I don't have a walker anymore. You can't tell by looking at me that I'm sick or that I have a whole hardware store in my spine. I know what I can't do, but I'll tell you what I can do. I can get up here and speak, usually. I can share, I can write, I can advocate, I can tell my story, and so can you, except when I can't, because sometimes I can't. Have the courage to say I can't. It's okay. It's not a dirty phrase. Give yourself permission to rest. Be gracious with yourself and acknowledge your limits, because your future self is going to thank you.